parenting, manliness, marriage, fitness, and finance. Nothing's off limits, and we try to address it all with candor and a little bit of humor. Hey everyone, thanks for joining us for another week of the Surf and Turf Show. With me as always is Adam. Adam, how you doing today, my friend? Doing good?
Living the dream, my friend.
Living the dream. It's such a great expression, right? Living the dream. Because it can mean so many things to so many people. But today, I'm living a dream. So we're doing the straight Griswold style family vacation. So as soon as this show ends, we're going to get on a plane with all the kids and we're going to fly and we're going to see family. And that, I don't know, this whole week I've been thinking, looking at accountability, like what we talked about last week, accountability. How do you take responsibility for your actions? And this is another one of those times when I signed up for a thing. We're going to do the thing. But oh man, there's a lot of accountability involved. It's just getting to the airport with all the stuff, right? You know this game.
So you have, are all five kids going or just four?
Just four. College boy, doesn't have to do it.
Okay. So you must have like Home Alone style accountability practices going on.
100%.
Get head
Like
counts.
the neighbor's kid could like realistically end up in the
Yes.
car, like going on the vacation. Yes, 100%. That is where we are. We're in kind of the economy of scale, in terms of accountability. Where you're like, all right, everything here, 666. Oh, we got six everything. We are good. Get in the car. We are leaving. Hopefully, we don't forget anything too important. But that's the ugly side of accountability, right? Accountability sounds fun when you're like, yeah, I said a thing and I'm going to stand by it. I'm going to take charge. I'm going to own that. But like the reality is accountability is a lot of like really nuggish work. It's a lot of just bean counting and making sure things are straight because that's what accountability looks like. So we did talk accountability a lot, right? And I think we missed one big thing. We missed one huge element of accountability. And I think we missed it because you and I we're both married. We got kids at home. And so I think we kind of just talked across it. But I wanted to spend a little time this morning talking about the accountability that comes with making a kid. Like we talk a lot about fatherhood. We talk a lot about, the act of being fathers and trying to raise kids and all that. But what about that first step? Just recognizing that you made a kid and that is your kid. And now you've just bought 18 years of accountability functionally. I mean, I think we need to spend just a little time talking that because I think it's a huge thing in the man's life.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. I mean, it's a life changing thing when that occurs. It totally reorients your posture towards the world.
Wait, it should, right? I mean, I guess you're right. It did for me. It probably did for you. It sounds like, and it should for anybody making a kid. But I think when you look at some of the data right now, it doesn't look like it does necessarily for a lot of guys out there. It looks like a lot of guys view it fairly casually, and that there's not a lot of pressure. I don't know. I don't know why there's not pressure, but it seems like there's not a lot of pressure to take accountability for the kids we make. That TED talk you sent me. I don't remember the guy's name. Do you remember? Do you remember well enough to talk it?
It was a Jonathan Haidt one. Yeah.
So fascinating talk. He was talking about how polarization drives us to ignore major problems in society, which was fascinating anyway, right? That's so true, right? Like half of the population denies any given catastrophic event that's coming, and the other half thinks that it's just gospel truth, and that's a strange place to be. That kind of dichotomy where we don't even agree on like the very most fundamental things. But one of the things he talked about at the end was on the demographic side. He was talking about basically fatherless children rates, like the rate of children who have no father present in their lives. And to me, that is one, it's a catastrophe, right? That's such a huge thing. I mean, I'm not a sociologist. He did reference a lot of data on what that means and the impacts of that on, the house and then society in general. And they were basically all negative. I mean, is that your impression?
Yeah, so let me just back up and kind of set the stage with the video here. So Jonathan Haidt, social psychologist, New York's Stern School of Business, NYU, and several TED Talks. This one was about, it was like kind of, he was using the metaphor of asteroids hurtling towards Earth. And if we all saw this asteroid, so this TED Talk came out before Don't Look Up, but
That's like
maybe that was
2012. Yeah.
an interesting like counterpoint to this. But so he points out four asteroids and basically like, two that kind of right leaning people focus on, and two that left leaning people focus on. So he had climate change and rising income inequality as two issues that people on the left focus on, and then he had unsustainable federal debt, and then out of wedlock births on the right that people on the right focus on, and then he made the point that like the other side, made all efforts to like minimize and like disregard those other two problems. They're like, no, 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 that's not a problem. That's not a problem. And his point was like, hey, we all need to like look at all four of these problems and be like, these are problems that we should all address. And you know, he's giving the talk in the height of political polarization back then, and just kind of making the point that we all need to kind of see these common threats emerging for the future.
And it was really well done, right? He did a great job with it, and obviously his basic message that hey, if you let, well, in this case, like the team you're on, or ego, or I guess partisanship, like drive your decision making, then you're going to ignore problems that, whether or not you want to accept them, probably all have some merit, right? Like whether or not you think they're all as sensational as everybody says, they're problems. And the data he's showing is hard to argue with. It's hard to disagree that there's probably something going on here, but rather than come up with constructive solutions, we just bicker about it. I think that he's referring to the negative side of a lot of what we've talked about, like a lot of the basic fundamentals that we're saying you need to be a good person are exactly the things that he's talking about needing to avoid, right? We're saying, yeah, look, absolutely. If you start ignoring facts and making decisions based on kind of this team rah rah approach, you're going to make really bad decisions. You're not looking at the world objectively at all. And I think we'll get into that today because I'd love to bridge into decision making. But man, the demographic one, it just hit me home. It hit me home. I mean, I grew up with divorced folks. I know you grew up with divorced folks as well, and I just remember I remember a lot of the holes that could have been filled had there been a dad there, and we had some stepdads around. We got the stepdad thing, which you talk about a thankless job. Is there any more thankless job than being a stepdad? Like what? It is brutal. I mean, did you experience the stepdadness when you were growing up?
I did, yeah, I did from time to time. Yeah, I mean, I think yeah, stepmom as well. I mean, that's definitely talk about. Yeah, I think yeah, I think that's a whole nother side of challenge. I think it's an equal challenge, but we'll focus on the stepdad side for that. Yeah, I did have some, and I think some of them tried to be more hands on than others. The ones I liked were they kind of gave space, and then they're like able to hey, I'll weigh in and give you advice if you need it, but I'm not going to kind of come over the top kind of thing.
Yeah, that's the challenge, right? Because I don't want to say good or bad, right? I think stepdad is just a hard job. You have good stepdads, you have bad stepdads, just this is the nature of people. But I feel like it's a job where you have to like walk onto a construction site every day with like a quarter of the tools that you actually need to do it. Like you're missing so much because structurally you just don't have it, right? You're not the parent. And so normally, I think when our marriage, we often find ourselves on kind of it's us against kids on a lot of issues, right? Kids want this, both parents agree this is not it, therefore we are on the opposite team. But I think with step parent, you often end up in this kind of triangular thing where sometimes kid is on parent's side against step parent, sometimes step parent and parent are on side, but the step parent always has this sort of awkward extra level of restrictions on what they can do that really, gosh, I am sympathetic. That's got to be a tough job.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean it's an impossible situation. I think, and you're right. It adds an extra layer of complexity to any efforts to parent and develop a kid.
But what's the flip side of that? What's the flip side is no dad, right? And I had periods of that growing up. We're just basically me and mom doing our thing, and man, particularly as boys get into middle age or middle school age and into the teens, I don't think that works. I think there's some challenges there. I mean, obviously everybody does the best they can. My mom did the best she could. I'm sure mom did the best she could. But man, teenagers, I feel like a teenage boy needs a dude in the house to like hard check some of what's
Mhm.
going on. And honestly, I feel like that's got to be dad. Stepdad has a much harder time with it.
Yeah, and I think it's almost like you got two sets of eyeballs and focus and time that can drill into what's going on in the kids' lives. Because I think my mom was working, single mom working, so she I had other family around to help out, but she's focused on like putting food on the table, and earning a paycheck to support us. And then she's also got to like deal with the developmental challenges my sister and I had. So it's like um, having that extra parent is just an extra set of eyeballs and focus to, okay, wait, did you notice this about, so and so? Did you notice this? Like, and you can kind of then you can test your impressions against each other, and your perspectives, and kind of come to a better approach to parenting together.
Yeah, that's right. That's the thesis and antithesis. You get synthesis, right? But I mean, just like we're doing right now, I think a lot of the best ideas come from two people talking, especially if two people have divergent viewpoints. I mean, it's just a good way to kind of solve problems. So that angle of what you're talking about is exactly right. Like two people is always, well, not always, but in most cases, I think two people's ideas are going to be better than one's for reading a given situation and reacting to that situation, because you just get that extra perspective that can kind of fill in the gaps in your own. Like, I see it this way, maybe I get a little stuck in the way that I see this particular situation. Maybe me and the kid have a specific dynamic that kind of starts developing, and the other parent can kind of check that, because kids, man, that is the way it
Mm-hmm.
is, right? You kind of get into these ruts, and then sometimes
Mm-hmm.
as the kid ages, the rut changes, and the rut will be like one way, and sometimes I like mom a little better, sometimes I like dad a little better. And that's a thing. But gosh, with one parent or with one step parent, I feel like it just doesn't. That's not as good. But that's also not entirely what I'm talking about, right? Because I do think uniquely, also, like as dudes get bigger, and a 15 or 16-year-old is in the house, like I did a lot of stupid stuff when I was a teenager, and I think I would have
Mm-hmm.
done less stupid stuff if my dad had been home. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with that. I got up to all sorts of nefarious mayhem as a teenager, so I can definitely, and that was just because, you know, I had the freedom. Now, the converse of that is like um, running into reality face first, time and time again. Can be helpful for your development because you start to learn, how to you learn, well, I'm not going to do that again, or, well, that was stupid. And ideally, you're learning from those experiences in an unstructured way. But I think it's better to have the mentorship and guidance. You can kind of short circuit a lot of those, unpleasant learning experiences.
That's so true. Unpleasant learning experience. Is that what we'll call them? We'll call them unpleasant learning experiences, right? The only saving grace is that the phone didn't really exist. Like the cell
Mm,
phone, the smartphone. Like, I didn't have a cell phone all the way through college. I certainly didn't have a camera on me at all times, or ability of
right.
any friend to videotape what I did and immediately upload it to the universe. So, um,
Yes.
you know, thank heaven for small blessings. But that must be tough. That must be tough right now. That's an
Mm,
aspect of childhood that I cannot imagine. But so what you're talking about though, running into reality and learning those lessons. I agree. I think it was formative. I think you could say that our generation actually learned a lot that way through kind of hard conflict with reality. But what was the attrition rate from that? Like, I think
mm,
one of the reasons those demographic stats are so bad is that what you see is that you see people, particularly young men, I gotta say, but I think young women a lot too, running into reality the hard way. Now, it doesn't mean you can't get yourself back out of that, but it does put you on your back foot. And I think that mentorship that you described, from having that dad there that's like, look, I did this the hard way. I think I can help you do it the less hard way. Now, they might not listen, but at least I think it takes some of the hard corners off of it so that it makes it
mm.
a little smoother. I don't know. That's just my guess.
Yeah, and then so the liberal perspective is like it takes a village to raise a child, and then the conservative perspective would be like it takes a family to raise a child. And the bottom line is like you need both those aspects. You need like a strong family, and then you need a strong community there to kind of guide character development as children grow up. And as we've seen, we're kind of in an age. Robert Putnam, Bowling Alone. He just wrote a new book called The Upswing. He's got a Netflix documentary called Join or Die, talking about the lack of community connectivity. So we've like lost that in the last, I guess really it started in the 70s, but we've kind of been slowly moving away from community connection, and that makes the family even more important.
Well, it's weird, right? But at the same time, you talk of those dueling meteors, right? But at the same time, the family is also being eroded. And you're like, wow, so we got neither. So one side can say, well,
Mm-hmm.
it's the community that's being eroded. And the other can say the family's being eroded. And really, both are right. And at the same time, we can all kind of ignore the other side of the problem and just, you know, beat the drum about how terrible our problem is and how the other one is really is. And
Right.
that's how unconstructive is that? Because the reality is like, yeah, I mean, when we were growing up, community is more of a thing. You go outside, you play baseball with the neighbors. I mean, we had a group of kids who played tennis ball, baseball functionally around the neighborhood almost every day. And there was a level of, I think, checks and balances that existed there because there were enough parents that had enough skin in that game that were keeping an eye on it to make sure that it never really it could only escalate so much. So it kind of kept
Mhm.
it kind of moderated. But I think that's what they're talking about, right? That's that kind of community, that voluntary self-organization that Alexis de Tocqueville always talked about with America, like being so awesome. Like
Mhm.
that's the thing that was so good. But
Mhm.
I I think kind of, I don't know, maybe it's devices. I'm not totally sure what has kind of dried that up. But I see far fewer
Yeah,
kids outside.
devices are a big part of it, and so I'm a huge evangelist for Jonathan Haidt because I really feel like he's had his finger on the pulse of a lot of what's been happening in society. So he had a succession of books, 10, 15 years ago, like Happiness Hypothesis, Righteous Mind. I used to teach, his stuff on the Righteous Mind about morality, because it really explains kind of the differences between liberal and conservative thought. But now recently he's come out with, the coddling of the American mind, talking about, the phenomenon on college campuses, cancel culture, all that stuff. And then recently the anxious generation is really kind of sweeping the nation, not to get like hyperbolic, but like, and he's kind of analyzing like, what is the problem, and he's pointing to, a couple different factors that collide there. One of them being social media, the pairing in 2008 of the smartphone with Facebook, social media getting on there. And then we're kind of losing play-based childhoods. So a lot of the recommendations that he makes are encouraging free play, where kids are playing without an adult that's like mediating their conduct. So they're better able to, oh, okay, well, yep, some people are just jerks. Some people are not going to like me. I have to learn how to deal with that, and not like run to an adult to kind of adjudicate the situation.
No, that's it, right? I mean, you want some hard checks in place so that if somebody does need to run to an adult because you fall off the trampoline and you break your arm, for example, you need some adults generally present. But kids should be, I think, discouraged in a lot of ways from coming to adults with all their problems, right? A lot of that should just be worked out at the kid level. And there is something structurally about, I've read The Anxious Generation, and it's good. It's quite good. But yeah, there is something structurally about the way we're doing it now that discourages free play. I don't know if it's the kind of, well, okay, the outside world is really dangerous. If I put my kid outside, my kid's gonna get into some kind of danger, or if it's no other kids are doing it, and so like as fewer kids, you hit this like diminishing, cliff or diminishing returns cliff where, well, there's no kids outside, so I'm not gonna send my kid outside because what's he gonna do out there? And so nobody sends their kids outside. I don't know.
Yeah, there's another aspect because I'll get into it with my wife about it because, and this goes back to the risk discussion, like what you're willing to let your kids do, and then, you know, I mean, I've seen the Free Press had an article a couple months ago about a mother that got, she got like arrested because she let her kid walk around, and I can't remember how old the kid was, but it's like, you know, there's a social stigma now associated with free ranging your kids, and like what is developmentally appropriate for them to like to go off and do by themselves. And there's like a Japanese show that like has like 4 year olds like going to the like grocery store and like coming back. So, but in our country, we've like excessively, we have this excessive safetyism, and we're and so not not only are we like freaked out about it, but then we're like gonna report other people for letting being neglectful parents if they let their kids do that.
Yeah, and the device doesn't help with that either because you can like immediately log on and report somebody to CPS from like your own phone. Like take a picture, upload, boom. CPS is going to investigate their house. Like what? One, why would you ever see that? Is there anything more destructive to neighborly relationships than reporting somebody's kids? Anyway, terrible. But yes, I completely agree. Like to me that feels like lunacy, right? I mean, we could do a whole episode on risk. We could talk about risk. We talk about balancing risk, but the idea that kids need to learn how to manage risk is 100%, I think, a fact. I don't think that that should be
Mhm.
disputable, right? You don't want them to not learn how to manage any risk until they hit 18. And so free play outside, and presumably, I mean, I don't know where you live, but I live in a place where it's not that dangerous to be outside. We got a forest behind the house. They could be in that forest. I mean, there's not bears in the forest, right? I mean, it's not. There's not packs of wolves. Like, it's unlikely they're going to perish or have anything serious happen. But still, there is that perception that somehow that is dangerous. Kids shouldn't be out alone in the woods. Like, why not? I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I don't know where you live. Maybe it's more dangerous. Maybe it's substantially more dangerous than where I live.
Yeah, no, it's definitely, you know, kids can definitely play where I live. I mean, and that's, maybe we're fortunate, so maybe we're lucky that we have that situation, and not everybody has that. But I think if you can't, if you don't feel safe where you live, then the next best thing would be like just setting them up in environments where they can free play. If you can take them to a park and just give them a wide tether of like a couple hundred yards, and you kind of are able to monitor them, but they're playing without an adult there to like tell them hey, stop being mean to him. Like um, they've got to try to work that stuff out, and then if they can't, then there's like then an adult can get involved. But like the first step should not be run to an adult. It should be like try to work things out as as a small group.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. I mean, obviously, you can create. I do a lot of exercises. I do a lot of training, and what you want to do is you want to create a kind of transparent control measures to it, so that the person inside of the exercise, the person receiving the training, doesn't know that there are limits to what they can do, but there are limits to what they can do in the name of safety, because you don't want people to shoot each other. You don't want somebody to hit a bomb and die. So you create invisible boundaries that allow the perception of free play, that allow them to exercise those muscles without actually ever being at risk. And to an extent, you're right that yeah, everybody doesn't grow up in a place that's safe enough where your kids can play outside. But I would argue that's pretty subjective. And what I mean is, we grew up pretty broke. Grew up pretty broke by a Safeway. Grew up playing in some places that nobody had any real business playing from like 40-year-old me's perspective. But at the same time, like everybody was doing that. And when I drive around now,
Right.
it seems like a lot of the places that have the I would say healthiest attitude toward free play are the places that look like the most hazardous places for that free play to exist. And so
Right.
I think a lot of times this is actually just like a middle class illusion that actually it's all really dangerous and we need to kind of get rid of that. We need to like bubble wrap everything and
Yeah, I mean that goes back to like the milk cartons, of our childhood, with missing children, and like exactly how, statistically prevalent is that phenomenon of, children being abducted. I don't know, but I think
uh,
it's kind of like the, not wanting to fly because of terrorism, and then there's like, 10,000 more deaths on road accidents. So I think it was an example of like, we had a fear that, it's like a shark attack. Like, yeah, that happens, but it's like statistically not that prevalent. And then the mitigation is like at times more harmful than the actual thing.
that's the trick, right? Because I wouldn't obviously downplay the severity of anybody who had a child abducted. And if I got bitten by a shark, I mean, the times that those things have happened to me, it's been like,
Yes.
that's absolutely enormous, right? Oh my gosh, it's the worst thing ever. But does it change my fundamental decision making? And you have to get into that risk versus reward. And really, I think the likelihood of risk versus severity of risk discussion, in the military, obviously, this is like bread and butter. We do this all the time with everything. That's professionally kind of my job and your job, I think, is to balance, risk severity versus risk likelihood and cost of control measure, right? How much does it cost to mitigate this risk? But that's what we're talking about right now. Okay, how
Yeah.
serious is the risk to the kid? How likely is it to happen? And what does it cost to protect the kid from it? Because we shouldn't wish away that cost. We shouldn't avoid the idea that protection actually does cost something, not just in terms of money and resources, but in terms of that kid's development.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, the older I get, the more, you know, an expression like pick your poison, it's like it's so useful for like every environment. You're
Right.
always, you pays your money and you makes your choice, right? Like
Oh, yep.
you're gonna incur, choices and drawbacks to whatever course of action. So if you make things excessively safe at the tactical or like the local level, then you're incurring more strategic or like overarching risk. So you have to kind of weigh those two against each other.
For sure. I think everyone that lived through COVID can understand whatever side of it you fell out on. That discussion played out to its like logical extreme across society. And you're like, well, here is a huge disparity in people's views on what was the risk, what was the severity, and what was the cost of the control measures. And oh man, did that ever get hot? And we're still
Hmm.
paying the price for
Hmm.
the disagreement that we had over that, right? I don't know that we're
Yeah.
still paying the price in terms of cost specifically. I think it's mostly in the past at this point. Although I'm about to go to an airport, so I could be wrong.
I, I would say like the damage to like institutional trust and like connective tissue
Yes,
in communities, like that definitely it did damage that we're still seeing today.
100%. I think we're still feeling the reverberations of that, particularly the damage to institutions, right? I mean, the lack of trust in institutions is I think higher than it's been in my life, and I don't know that they were particularly trusted before that, but it feels
Yeah.
pretty rough now.
And then yeah, and there's a lot that goes into that. Like Martin Gurry wrote a book, and I'm like drawing a blank for the name of it. The revolt of the revolt of the public, and it's basically he makes the case that because of social media and the internet, we're able to the level of transparency is higher to political entities, to institutions, so we're able to see exactly when they screw up, where before they may have been able to kind of like sweep things under the rug. So now we're dissatisfied with them, but there's no real good alternative. So it's just like there's just a lot of disgruntlement going around.
Yes, disgruntlement. I like it. Yes, disgruntled. There's generally disgruntlement and a lot of finger
Yeah.
pointing, right? Because the one thing the internet's
Yes.
really good at is making sure you always know exactly who's responsible for whatever you're unhappy with, right? The
Right.
internet's amazing at generating somebody else to blame for things.
Yes. It's never my fault.
It's definitely never my fault, or anybody that I like or that thinks
No,
generally the same way I do. It's definitely them,
absolutely not.
they that do this to me.
The
Man,
bad ones.
it's, it sounds so stupid when you say it like that, but it's so easy to work yourself into that, to kind of paint yourself into that corner. What? So this is a tangent, but it's an interesting tangent, and it's a tangent that it's related to what we were talking about. But what was the? Let's see, what was the article you sent me about the internet and the internet allowing people to redefine themselves? That thing was
Oh, that was
fascinating.
yeah, that was the Mary Harrington Soul Trader. Let me see if I have that somewhere. Yeah, that she like I read that and I was blown away. I'm like, wow, you are a great writer. Like,
It was solid.
holy
I mean, aside from being really
cow.
well written and just solid
Yeah,
writing, like her insights were great.
yeah.
But while you're looking through it, I mean, what I took away from it was basically, I loved the idea that she basically talks about technology's impact on society, talking from originally the printing press, and then through birth control, and then through communication devices. Basically, people are becoming increasingly impacted by technology. And no surprise there. But what really got me was when we got down to the internet and she was talking about how it allowed you for the first time ever to anonymously recreate yourself as a person, right? Before that, it was face to face. And so aside from like weird personals ads, do you like pina coladas kind of stuff, it would be difficult to recreate yourself entirely as a person because you're kind of stuck with what you got. You can move to a new town, but you still got your face, you still got the way you talk, you still got yourself. The internet took all that away and said, now you can make yourself anything you like. And she referenced the famous New Yorker cartoon with the two dogs, where the one dog says, on the internet, nobody knows you're a dog. And it's kind of like mind blowingly insightful. You're like, well, yeah. But now we almost take that for granted. You're like, well, now I assume that every third person I see on the internet is actually either a robot or, an illegal like opinion farmer from somewhere
Right. Yeah,
because
Troll Farm.
it's just the way it is, right? But what I loved about her, well, if you've got the data on it, why don't you roll
Oh,
that out?
yeah. So and I want to get into the concept of polymodernity late in a later episode, but she basically starts off with like there's a pre-modern understanding of the human as a soul. Then you move into the modern era, and it's the idea is like a self, and then postmodern comes in, and then it becomes identity. Just I'll read this. Just kind of, she's kind of setting the table here for her essay. In what follows, this paper will trace the interlocking story of souls and information technologies from Plato to our transhumanist era. At each stage, these developments have brought tremendous benefits as well as costs and metaphysical convulsions, and today is no exception. None of what follows is an argument for unplugging the internet, but if we are to survive the latest convulsions, we will need to revisit those ways we have come to apply modernity to ourselves. If we are to master our machines rather than be mastered by them, we must recognize identity for what it is, the dead byproduct of applying our technologies to ourselves. In its place, we can and must restore the older and fuller understanding of ourselves, not as mere bodies, not as plastic self actualizing identities, or even as data processors, but souls. And in retrieving this fuller sense of what we are, we may yet manage to escape the epistemological cul de sac of modernity without losing the gifts modernity has afforded us.
Because that's the trick, right? So that last bit and what we just talked about, being able to remake yourself on the internet, those two things stuck together in my head, and I was thinking about them while I was working out the other morning, because that last bit of like, well, you wouldn't want to not be able to make yourself who you are at all. You would want no, you wouldn't want to have no control over your kind of destiny, because in the kind of pre-modern time, if you're a farmer's kid, guess what you're going to be? It's real easy, a farmer, right? There wasn't a lot of other options unless you became like a bandit or a raider or you joined the army, and then if that was even an option in your time, but your your range was narrow. But then when you have the ability to kind of create yourself, and then the internet takes that to its logical conclusion, it's not just move to a new town, get a job that I want, it's make myself into anything I want. Whoa, that opens the aperture really wide. And I think also we don't appreciate how much there's like this reflected effect. So yes, you can make yourself whatever you want on the internet, but by exposing yourself to the internet, just like you get a tan from the sun, right? You actually absorb back an identity from the internet that actually you don't have a lot of control over. And so balancing all that, taking the good of I know who I am, I'm comfortable with who I am, I can make myself the best that I am, to I can make myself anything I want, to oh no, I'm being painted into a corner and made into something that I didn't even
Right.
want to be. How do you take the best of all that and then forge yourself an identity? How do you make those decisions?
Yeah, and this, I mean, this all interconnects to risk and to parenthood because,
Yeah,
I heard somebody describe YouTube as like a plate of wasps, which I just thought was like hilarious because it's like you have this you have a miraculous technology. You can go on YouTube, you can like see miracles, you can like learn how to fix your sink. Like
I
there's like
literally learned how to fix my
you
sink not very
you
long
can
ago
like
on YouTube.
do anything with this thing, but then you can also see like the most toxic, awful parts of humanity, like beheading videos and like just all this just cesspool. So how
Fail
do
cam.
you
You could just 8-second clips of pain forever. Like
yeah,
what?
so
Why?
like how do you meter that, how do you meter that for not only yourself as an adult human, but like for your children? Like it's like a very almost impossible task that we have before us.
It's funny, right? Because I would have to immediately walk back everything I just said on free play and let your kids play in open spaces, because the internet to me is 180 degrees from that. Like to me, the real
Right.
world, I'm mostly a hey, go out, do what you can, scrape some
Right.
knees, run from a bear. But on the internet, oh my gosh, it's completely the opposite. Like you can touch it in the smallest of ways that are structured and will feed you things that I think are useful, because otherwise, I think it'll destroy your brain.
Well, and that's the point that Height makes is like we're like excessively focused on risks in the physical world, like kidnapping or
Right.
bullying, but like we're almost blind to the risks in the virtual world, in the cyber world, and it's like time to kind of reevaluate that and understand that holistically.
No, and I think it's one of the huge failings of our basically parental generation is exactly that. I think he's so spot on with that, because, I mean, you could say that the march of civilization for the last whatever thousands of years, right, wrong, or indifferent, has made the world physically for most folks a lot safer, right? I'm not saying there's not still
Mhm.
people who live in dangerous places today. 100% there are, but on average, the real world has gotten a lot safer. But oh my gosh, whatever you want to call the storytelling world, the spoken world, the digital world, obviously the digital
Mhm.
world's pretty new, has gotten infinitely more destructive, and you can ruin your brain functionally, I think, before
Yeah.
you can even walk with the power of the internet and make I think you can make yourself incapable of functioning in the real world before you even enter the real world at 18, just by the overconsumption of what's available on the internet for free.
And so, and I think our generation, like we have this very difficult challenge before us where we have to raise our children in an environment completely alien to the one we grew up in. So we have
Yeah.
to make risk decisions based on something, that we didn't have to live through. So our children, like, when they're raising their kids, they're going to say, okay, mom and dad were like too heavy handed on X and they were too lenient on Y.
Yeah.
So I'm going to kind of fix that for when I'm raising them. But like, we don't have the luxury of like, experiencing that. Like, yeah, like some things, yeah, like, I don't know, like 50, 60% is the same, but like that other percent, you're like, this is a totally new, because the same tools that give them socialization online with their peers are also like giving them self-harm, giving them body issues. So it's like, how do we navigate that tension?
That's it. And it's because I think one of the reasons it came like that is because functionally the technology still looks kind of like it did when I was a kid. Like in the end, I'm sitting before a box. The box is feeding me G.I. Joe. 6 year old Dan is watching commercials and getting his dose of commercialism. It looks kind of the same. If I see my kid sitting in front of the box and clicking the mouse, there's something in my brain's like, all right, he's watching TV, right? It's basically the same thing,
Yeah.
but
Like Saturday
TV,
morning.
that's right, it's just cartoons. Except he could be watching like Faces of Death 7 and like ISIS setting people on fire with a porn window in the corner, and you're like, oh, that didn't exist on TV. Like you could maybe your friend had Cinemax or something, but it could only get so bad.
Right.
And oh my gosh, I think that is to your point made it challenging. It's like, well, this kind of looks about right. It's probably going about right. And then you're like, there's this world that your kid is swimming in that is
Mhm.
a darker and more horrible place than anything the real world for most
Right.
folks could offer.
Mhm.
It's just wild. That is a challenge for sure. How do you fix it in your house? How do you solve this problem?
Yeah, so I mean, it's different. I think we're taking a different tack with each kid. So, I mean, number one, I'm starting with myself. So, I'm starting to like curtail my own smartphone use by like just keeping it in my office, and it doesn't, and I'm like, this is a very like, privileged thing, right? Like I have a cell phone chip in my watch, so I can literally with headphones and my watch, I can leave the house and I can take calls, I can text, I can get directions, I can listen to music. So I'm trying to like fix myself, right? First, my own like attentional situation, and then I can like move on to the kids and be like, okay, like you need to have some moderation here, right? Like you've got time on social media, on your phone, and then you've got like time in meat space, where you're like just out doing stuff in the world. You're working out, you're playing outside, you're moving your body, and then you're like engaging with a book. You're engaging with something that's gonna like help your longer form focus. And then, it's tough because like my youngest daughter like wants to listen to music, but it's like, you let her loose on Spotify, it's like she can get into like all sorts of like inappropriate stuff. So
She could hear this
um
show. Like, God help
she
her.
could
Like,
watch this show, which would be terrifying.
it'd be the
So
worst.
yeah, so it's a constant, I would say it's a constant battle. And then you layer on top of that, you've got like personal devices like iPads and smartphones. Then you've got like the house devices that have like Roku's and various things. And so like water seeking its lowest level, the kids are going to try to find, they're going to exploit the seams in the system. So, are there
They're
parental
so good at it.
controls on that? Oh no. Okay. I'll go over here and I'll do this, and it's like, then they're like on their school devices, like doing, and I'm like, man, like you've got to constantly be on guard. And it's like, screen time in itself is not bad. Like that's not what we're saying. Like we're trying to find like a responsible relationship, so it's not, your eyeballs are glazing over, and then you're just locked into inappropriate content. So yeah, all that's a very long-winded answer to say I haven't figured it out at all. But I think with
Yeah.
each kid, I'm like getting a little bit better handle on it. So it's just a work in progress.
It is such a work in progress. And there's nothing better than having your kids aren't maybe old enough for this yet, but my kids are old enough now that they're like, "Oh, you're doing it this different this time, huh, Dad? You're doing it a little
Yeah.
different." It's like, Well, yeah, you say it like that's bad. I mean, I'm an adaptive
Right.
person. Would you rather I just stumbly, blindly do the same dumbass thing over and over again? Oh, yeah, I didn't do it right with you. Well, come on, I should fix it. You're like,
Yeah.
well,
I no,
nobody
I
does
definitely
it.
hear that from the 16-year-old, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, well, like, wait till you have kids. That's usually my answer is like, well, you know what? When you have kids, you could do it all better. And, I'll be there
Yeah.
and you could call me and you could tell me about how great it's going for you because you knew exactly what to do and you did it all right. And nobody appreciates sarcasm. It's just nobody appreciates that. But
Yeah. I mean, it's probably the most. I used to have this diagram of like simple, complicated, complex, and it's
Mhm.
like, you know, raising a kid is like probably the most complex thing that humans do because it's like, it's such a dynamic, fluid, the
Yeah.
context, the environment is always changing, and then the kid is going through different developmental stages, and then like the family itself is like an ecosystem of all the people in it that like establish an equilibrium point, and it's like it's just such a challenging thing to manage.
Then you have no outcome. Like you have no defined outcomes. You don't really know kind of the outcomes you want. You kind of maybe have some idea. You have no idea if you're achieving those outcomes because the returns on this
Right.
investment are also in the future. They're like,
Right.
well, I made a fentanyl addict. Crap. Like, I don't know what I
Yes.
did, but that's what happened. And it's hard to react. It's hard to adapt your strategy when the return on what you did is so far from the thing that might have caused it. You're like, it's really unknown. But that is that complexity you're talking about. That's why it's not just
Yeah.
complicated. That's why you can't just have AI ask you how to raise your kid. Well, maybe you can actually. I don't know. I've never asked ChatGPT how to raise a kid. Maybe it's better at it than me. Maybe it
That
actually would be
well,
like,
yeah,
I
that's
would
definitely
offer.
coming. Yeah,
I'm sure it
that's
is.
definitely.
I'd be like, all right, ChatGPT, yeah, you're real smart now. Well, let's get you up at 3 in the morning. Let's see how smart you are, ChatGPT. Like, all right, yeah, I'll take that challenge. Like,
Oh yes, yes, yes.
so painful. But what about is you and your wife on the same page on this? You and your wife on the mostly the same page?
I mean, occasionally we are. I would say, like,
Yeah,
I mean, it's just, I think you gotta have a dialogue. That we're gonna view risk differently. We're gonna, temperamentally, we're gonna view things differently. So you've got to find, equilibrium point because the kids they're gonna exploit the seams. They're like insurgents. They're just gonna like find the seams and like exploit them. So you've got to
they're so good at it.
um,
They're
you've
so
got to
good.
discuss and find, there's things I don't agree with that we do. There's things that she doesn't agree with that we do, but we do them because we're like, this is like, we've talked and we've kind of like, okay, this is a compromised position. We're gonna like we'll roll with this and then we'll readjust, as the situation progresses.
So, I mean, you've been married a while, right? You've been married more than a minute.
Yeah, sorry.
It's not a trap. It's
19.
not a
Yeah,
trap. Like, it's,
yeah, almost 19 years. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, what about you?
24. We will hit 24 years this May. So like
Hmm.
23 and some change. But
Okay,
I think,
nice.
I guess only reason I was going with that is presumably there was some kind of decision making that went into that. Because originally we were going to talk on this episode about decision making. We were like, all right, let's finish up with accountability. Let's talk about some decision making. But I think picking who you marry and or have kids with is one of like the biggest decisions ever. I feel like I did a pretty good job on that one. I don't know if it
Mhm.
was luck. Maybe it was luck. You probably feel like you did a pretty good job with that too. I,
Yeah,
I
it's
think. Yeah.
it's definitely challenging. It's a um because I think humans change a lot over the course of their life. So you've got to
Yeah.
make sure, like you hear the cliche and you're like, ah, marriage takes work. And you're like, okay, but it's like legit. It's like, that's like a legit, it takes work. Because you can be like two, like little ivy plants growing apart. If you're not careful and like, you have to like be able to, you know, connect to each other like outside the kids to like make sure that you're like growing entwined,
Hmm.
because it's, you can easily grow apart.
Yeah, we could do like 10 episodes on marriage and the challenges of making a long marriage work, because that is a real that is a real thing. I just I wrote a book on my time in Iraq, and that tension there, that tension of like, do you grow apart? Do you come together? How do you heal at the end of something traumatic? Like all of that is super real, and it doesn't go anywhere. I mean, it's easy to say water under the bridge, but it's not actually water under the bridge, and it all kind of just pools up wherever water under the bridge goes and makes a big puddle that you have to look at and deal with for the rest of your life. I don't know. So the water under the bridge analogy doesn't work there at all. But the reason it's like, yeah, it's at water under the bridge, and then it goes to the dam, and it overflows the dam sometimes. So you got to like patch it up. I don't know. Maybe that's closer. But the reason I was thinking about this when I was thinking of decision making is because I do believe that that decision is probably the most important decision most people ever make. Like I think it's arguably one of the most important decisions you ever make. But and now we're going to bridge this. We're going to bridge this with internet meme culture and all the terrible things your kid be exposed to. We're going to bring it all together right now because I think the way most of the people that I actually have worked with over the course of the last 20 years make that decision. Who should I go out and have sex with and potentially make a baby with? Because I think that's important to recognize that as a dude, anytime you have sex with a girl, you might make a baby with her because you, unless you have a vasectomy, do not actually have that much control over whether or not there's going to be a baby, right? Like you think you might, and you can take somebody's word for it, but actually you have a shot at incurring yourself 18 to X years of obligation every time you pull the trigger on that. And what's the decision making that goes into that? And this is sad, and this does not speak well of men everywhere, but the reality is, I think a lot of people's decision making is driven more by something like the crazy hot matrix, which is another piece of internet garbage that you can dig up, which basically says that the more beautiful a woman is, the crazier she can be and still be like, this is good. I should go with this. But that level of decision making, it's a joke. It's a meme. My wife tells me that there's actually a kind of bad attractive matrix for guys that is along the same lines. I'm not an expert on that, but I'll take her word for it. But the idea that that would be the decision making matrix that you use, even in joke, because a lot of jokes have kind of a kernel of truth, to determine whether or not you potentially marry or have kids with, because it sounds weird because those aren't the same and they're not always intertwined. But the reality is, if you're like, well, I'm not ready to pull the trigger. Wait, I had this guy on my team that was like, I'm not ready to pull the trigger on marriage. Like, you have kids with her. You live with her. Like, you have functionally pulled the trigger. You might not think you
Right.
pulled the trigger. Like, you've already made the
You're at like
commitment.
a common law
Yeah,
status.
like you're in there, buddy. That's a done deal. But the idea that that sort of calculus of like, well, she's good enough looking that I don't care that she's crazy, is kind of like part of a lot of people's decision making, and you're like, what the hell are you thinking, man? Like that is a terrible way to make a decision, and I think a lot of our decision making is that short sighted. And so if I was thinking of really positive attributes that we would want in our ideal selves to be, because we've all made decisions like that, we've all made these sorts of stupid decisions. That is what we've got to stop doing, right? We've got to stop making short-sighted decisions based on stupid premises that reach undesirable conclusions. And how do we get after that? What is the way? How do we get better at rational decision making?
Yeah.
Easy question, right?
Yeah.
Easy
I
question.
think this is a huge question. This may bleed into like the next episode, but I think, we've got emotional, just kind of send it, had a few drinks, decision, like, let's go with this. That's like a very, that's a very intuitive, fast and frugal, uh, and it may or may not
Frugal.
work out for you.
It ain't gonna be
But
frugal.
right, yeah, yeah, fast and costly. But I think if we're talking about applying, what rationality, objectivity to something, you're evaluating the choice in different domains, right? So you're sleeping on it, you're going for walks, you're thinking about it, you're reflecting on it, you're talking to the people in your life that whose opinions you really care about, you're getting their perspectives, you're looking at the person holistically, like their background, their families. I think you're trying to just bring a lot of different domain analysis to it. But at the end of the day, like, it's not an objective decision. Like, it's you're making that with your heart as well. So you have to, like, it has to be everything, your whole self has to be aligned to that decision.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. So as I think about it, you're right. Rationality is the wrong word, and I think I tend to use that word a little incorrectly. But really, what we're saying is, okay, if there was a spectrum of how you make a decision, and it was going to be kind of reason and rationally driven decision making versus like kind of passionate decision making. That probably neither one of those is the correct answer in and of itself, but probably, as with so many things, somewhere on that spectrum, you should balance, kind of this. I talk to people, I look at the reasons, I kind of evaluate the data. I look at, in the case of marriage, the person holistically. Like, do they take money from other people? Are they these characteristics that seem like, well, that's not a problem. I'm just going to think with my kind of passionate side here. Am I balancing those two? Because you don't want to just be too rational on it either. You want to actually feel some kind of, draw toward the person, whatever that magic is. Like, you got to feel a little of that, but maybe not just all magic. Maybe let's not go all magic. Otherwise, that kind of leads
Right.
you to trouble too.
Well, yeah. So I'm a huge fan of like trinities and triads. So, the Platonic,
Tridents.
or like,
Tridents. Is that
yes, yeah, 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 exactly, three in the tri. So, but like, the head, heart, gut, right? So all those three of those are the way that the Greeks kind of divided up, the thinking, the way that humans thought. So, you want those all in alignment when you're choosing your partner for a lifetime, and so. And then a big part, yeah, like, are you just like friends? Like, do you have like interests in common? Like, can you just like outside of like, a sexual attraction, like, do you enjoy like being around each other and like doing stuff? Like, that's an important part of it.
It's so often overlooked.
Right.
So often overlooked. I think you're right that, let's just going back a few minutes. I think you're 100% right that we probably just need to dig in way deeper to this, because we're not, at this point, we need to like set up all the premises behind what I just sloppily stumbled into, which is how do you make good decisions? And that's a pretty nuggish approach to that. And like, no, actually, there's a lot, because you need to balance first the way you intake data. Like, okay, are we subjectively or objectively looking at things like the situation? Because that's not really decision making. That's just, are you even like looking at the situation with a clear head? Or are you kind of stumbling into just seeing it from a really like rose tinted glasses sort of thing that's just the way you want to see it? I think that can probably lead you to bad decision making. But then past that, we need to talk about like what is good decision making, because now we're a little murky on it, right? Okay, well, there's a triad over here of like head, gut, heart. There's this rational, passionate sort of matrix. Like, how do we kind of spell that out better? And frankly, maybe we just do that next week. Maybe we just start in with it and just spell out like what good decision making looks like. Because I think certainly we would agree that whatever you think a good decision is, we all think that probably good decision making is a quality we should strive to better in ourselves. Like, I know I'm always trying to improve the quality of my decisions. Presumably, we're all doing that. So yeah, we can dig into that. We can dig into that next week. You feel academically up to the task of laying some of that shit out?
Always,
Just ready, man.
always.
Just ready. But I mean, so we're talking accountability a lot today, and we talked last week, and we spent probably more of the show today talking about accountability than meant to. But accountability is the ass end of that decision making, because, as we said, one of the qualities that we really strive for here is being accountable, being responsible. If you make a decision, you're going to stand by the decision. If you have a kid, you're going to help raise the kid. You're going to be engaged with the kid. But if you're constantly making bad decisions, it's quite difficult to hold yourself accountable and responsible, right? Because what person wants to constantly be accountable to the awful mess that they've laid out in front of them? That's a disaster. You're upping your own difficulty standard for kind of holding yourself to these principles. Am I way off there?
No, no, and I think in my like I remember my late teens, early 20s, like when I first joined the Navy. I mean, I was making bad decisions, and
As we all
there's
do.
like all the neuroscience. It's like, oh, your brains don't develop fully until you're 25. You're kind of like your impulse control, your executive function, all that. So. I was just making a succession of just bad decisions and just reaping the consequences, just as you were discussing there. So I think, yeah, it starts with like, you got to just like end you got to get a tourniquet and like just end the bleeding. You like,
Exactly.
so like
Stop.
stop, like those things that are bad, like stop doing those things. Like, like figure out like what is and a lot of that comes like with just good mentorship from the people in your life that can kind of help you. So if you're struggling, like you have to like look around and like seek people. If you're not fortunate to have people in your family or from your past that you can rely on, you've got to like look around and be like, hey, listen, like can you help me out? Like, I need some help here. And hopefully, if those are good people, like they're going to be able to like listen to your situation and kind of give you advice. And may, we all need that. We all like, we should have mentors at like every stage of our life, to help
Hmm.
us, make the leap to the next step because we're continually growing and learning.
And don't pick the wrong mentors, right? Because man, it's easy to pick the wrong mentors. But I was the same way, man. Like young dude, college, joining the army, total idiot. Like every decision I made was the worst decision. You look at it like probably could have been a little further along right now if I hadn't made a lot of those decisions. But hey, it's I like to say that it's just part of the experience. What we like where we are, and therefore we
But
shouldn't be
yeah,
too
that
upset
got
about
you
the
where
way we
you
got
are
here.
today. Yeah.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
Like the hard conflict with reality, it just worked out. But man, how many friends you got that didn't work out for it all? That had a much harder or deeper hole to dig themselves out of than you did.
Yes.
Like, because sometimes that conflict with reality, I mean, that's the other side of risk mitigation, right? Is like, actually, yeah, sometimes the risk just gets you. And then you're like, oof, man, you can, uh, you can dig yourself
Yeah.
out of a pretty
So,
bad hole.
on my website, I've got a like quote by Confucius, and it's like, by three methods we learn wisdom. The first, by reflection, is noblest. The second, by imitation, is easiest, and the third, by experience, which is bitterest. So, like, ideally, you just like you're learning, you're thinking about stuff, and you're like, oh, that sounds like a bad idea, I won't do it. Or I'm like, oh, Dan is a freaking good dude. I'm gonna follow what Dan does. I'm gonna imitate him. And then the last is like, okay, I've made every stupid mistake. So like I know I know every stupid thing. Like I'm gonna not do those stupid things anymore.
Oh man, I think at least for me, it was mostly somewhere between two and three. But even in two, it wasn't usually the good. It was the opposite. It was like,
Right.
oh man, I don't want to end up where that's too tough. All right, take a slight right, like, and then, hit all your own obstacles and have to fight your way through that. And I guess there is character built by doing that. And I mean, we could talk it, but I think there's probably value in making those mistakes. But probably it would have been better if I had made the mistakes from a position of trying to make good decisions and failing
Yeah.
slightly instead of mostly trying to make what I
And
knew then even were stupid
and
decisions.
and with my oldest like daughter, I've just realized I'm like humans just have to touch the stove sometimes. Like you
That's so
got like
true.
it cannot like I could be like, don't touch the stove, don't touch the stove. It's hot, don't touch it. And then
Oh
it's
yeah,
like they have to touch it themselves. They're like, damn, that was hot. Okay, all right, now you're not going to touch it again.
100%. One of my littler guys came in with a nasty cut on his finger not that long ago. And I looked at him because we just talked about the razor. And what's a razor? How's a razor work? This is a razor. How's a razor? This is what we shave with. Never touch the razor because it'll cut you. And he comes in, it's just this bleeding finger. And I'm like, you touched the razor. He's like, I did. It's like, was I right? He's like, yes. Like, okay, well, presumably we've learned. But
Now
I
we
don't know if
know.
Confucius had any kids, but kids are definitely not wired to do the noblest or easiest thing.
They're number three. Yeah, they're number three on the
Always
way.
number three. Back to Buffalo Wild Wings. I think we've covered all the ground we can cover today, man. I think we've
Yeah.
set ourselves up in a position where if we just keep talking about reason, we're just going to be BSing on stuff that we haven't really thought enough about. So we got to get into decision making. We got to really look
Let's
at
do
like
it.
what does it take to make a good decision, and how do we teach people to do it? How do we do it ourselves, and then how do we teach people to do it? And then accountability is easy if you only make good decisions, right? It's very easy for me to take responsibility for the things I do that turn out well. Like, yes, I did
Yes.
that. This was excellent. The opposite is a lot
I am so
less.
smart.
The opposite is so much less true. But yeah, I'm gonna read up. I'm gonna read up this weekend. I'm gonna try and get smart on it. I look forward to having a good discussion about it next week.
Sounds good, brother.
Dude, I'll see you later. Have a good weekend, man.
All right.